Hello, everybody. First of all, thank you very much for coming to this talk. We are going to present a dashboard we have been creating the last 3 months, trying to show the current status of the IoT projects in the open source. So, in this slide, you can see the URL. So, if you want, you can just now go to the URL and start playing with the dashboard we are going to present now. Also, these slides are in the talk page in the FOSDEM website, so you can also download the slides if you want now. This is the version 0.1, because our idea is to present you this first version of the dashboard, but from now, try to do it in a community way, trying to incorporate the views of the IoT community. So this dashboard is a kind of tool for everybody in the community. So this is our main goal. So I am Alberto Castillo I'm working right now in Finso2, developing another IoT platform. But mainly I'm an open source advocate, and also I'm developing in several open source projects. Now I'm working with the PLC4X guys that they are creating a framework for communicating with the industrial protocols in order to offer a common API for communicating with them. And Valerio is presenting this with me.
Yeah. Okay, I'm a Grimoire Lab maintainer and Chaos contributor, since Grimoire Lab is part of Chaos. And I work for Bitergia, that is maintaining the platform that we used to build the dashboard. Anyway, the platform is open source, and you can use it if you want. And okay, my interests are source code analysis, ETL processes, and reverse engineering. And I know basically nothing about IoT, but I was just analyzing the data.
Okay. So this is a outline of the presentation. We are going to present you some of IoT architectures, because we have based our analysis in these architectures, trying to find a common categories that we are going to use in the dashboard and the presentation to compare the status of IoT in different categories. And we have followed some criteria to select this open source project, because you can imagine that selecting between the hundreds of open source projects that exist in IoT is something that is difficult. So we have decided to focus in the projects that are already in the open source foundation, the main open source foundation, the Apache Foundation, Eclipse Foundation, and Linux Foundation. And after that, we are going to show you some findings and insights and some conclusions about our work. So why are we doing that? What is our main motivation for creating this dashboard? Probably the main motivation is, on one hand, understanding the IoT community. I have joined this community around 6 months ago, and I want to know the main projects, the different architectures, and to get this knowledge about this work, and also to offer visibility of the main projects in open source. Both of us are believers in open source, and we want to collaborate as much as possible in this field. And how are we doing that? In Grimoire Lab, we worked together in the past, and the focus of the platform is to doing analytics about software development communities. And we are using these tools to extract this information from the several communities in IoT. And as I said at the start, we want contribution by the IoT community in order to have this as a shared tool in the community. Some warnings about our work. The first one is that initially we are pretty focused in the industrial IoT sector. But after some thoughts about it, IoT and industrial IoT are not so different. So in some way they are merging the technologies. So it is not so important. About the project selection and classification is something pretty debatable. So for example, when we start showing you the categories and how we have classified the projects in each category, you can say, okay, this is a project I know about it, and you have classified it in a category that is not the best category. So it's something that we can discuss about it, and we can modify the repo and create future versions, improving it with your knowledge. And we are using pretty basic metrics, baseline metrics, because we prefer having this as a simple report, simple dashboard, in order to send clear messages. And if they are interested and we have value in it, we can go deeper with projects like Chaos from Linux Foundation, that we have here a photo for past Friday, that they have a meeting here also in Brussels, and we can cooperate with these communities in order to have more advanced metrics. And about the data, we use Creative Commons by licenses for all the data we are producing, the data that we're creating. But you are going to see data from GitHub, and this is data at the end is from the developers that are providing this information. Okay, about the selection of the projects, I have talked about it a bit, but at the end we decided to select projects from the main open source foundations. Probably you can say that with Apache, Eclipse, and Linux Foundation, also the Mozilla Foundation is working in Web of Things, but they are working in a pretty specific part of IoT. These foundations are working in several categories with different projects, so we think that that this is a better selection now. But this is something that we can change, okay? And about the comparison, we have analyzed the IoT. We have analyzed different architectures, and we have, at the end, decided to use some categories to classify the projects in order to compare them. So we are going to present them a bit later. So the first step, once we have decided to use the project from the foundation, is to define how we are going to classify these projects in different categories. And for doing that, we have put the focus in the IoT platforms, because they are really complex platforms that cover a lot of different things, a lot of different systems, and we have based our analysis in them. So I'm going not to spend more time here. These are the basic features in this kind of platforms. And the first one we have used is the one that is the reference architecture from the Industrial Internet Consortium. That is a consortium that is defining the different standards in the IoT fields. And they have a strong knowledge and position in the IoT, and we find that this is an interesting one. And you can find here that there are 3 tiers: the S tier, the platform, and the enterprise tier. This kind of architectures is the same architecture that we are going to find in the architecture proposed by the different foundations. I'm going not to enter in detail because we are going to lose all the time if I do that. But if we compare this high-level vision with the one from Eclipse Foundation, that they also propose to have 3 tiers: the constrained devices, the gateways and smart devices, and at the end, the cloud platform. You can map it against the previous one. And if you take a look to the proposal from the Linux Foundation, the architecture proposed by them, they are proposing an architecture, and also the different projects, they are also in some way classifying them in these architectures. You can find here also the 3 layers, the 3 tiers, in the same way. So it seems that there are common patterns between all the architectures that we can use to classify our projects in a common way for all of them. That this is the goal we have followed in the presentation. And talking about the Apache Software Foundation, they don't try to create this kind of approach, a strategic approach, trying to classify architectures in IoT and so on. They just offer a very attractive framework, a very attractive platform to work inside Apache. And they have, in the big data, clearly they have attracted the best open source projects about big data. And in IoT, they are also attracting some pretty interesting projects, but mainly focusing in data. So, project classification. After doing an analysis of all of that, we have concluded that the best categories for IoT are these 10 categories that we have here. Probably in the next release of the report, we are going to simplify that. And for example, the 4 categories of ecosystem that are pretty generic categories, we are going to merge in another one. But the idea is to have one category for always, mainly real-time operating systems and virtualization in the edge. Also, about protocols, the different protocols used to communicate in this IoT field. About the gateways, the software used in the gateways, that are a critical part of the platform. The processing of the data, doing the persistence of the data in the edge. Frameworks and platforms that exist, that cover most of the different systems. And at the end, the application frameworks designed to deploy applications that are going to use the IoT information, the IoT data, and process it for doing added value things. And at the end, the fog and ecosystems, that are the two last ones. Okay, so now Valerie is going to present you the Grimoire Lab.
Yeah. So, as Alvaro said, the idea of this work was to understand the IoT ecosystem. And after defining the category, the idea was to have a dashboard, so some way to visualize these categories and how to understand this ecosystem. So we use Grimoire Lab. Grimoire Lab, as I mentioned before, is a platform, free, open source, and is used to make for software development analytics. So in this case, we can see that we have, this is an overview of Grimoire Lab. We have different components. One component is in charge of retrieving data from popular data sources used in software development. Then we have another component that takes care of digesting this information that is stored in Elasticsearch, a JSON-based database. And then once we have the information here, we can visualize it. So we can generate reports, or in this case, the dashboard. So for this specific work, we focus basically on two data sources that are Git and GitHub. We selected the projects. We use Perceval to retrieve the data. Perceval is a tool that simplifies the life of people that want to extract data from software development tools. For instance, from Git, we extracted commits. From GitHub, we extracted pull requests and issues. The other two components are Graal wasn't used for this work, but is used to extract information about source code, so lines of code, comments, cyclomatic complexity. And then Arthur is a tool that is able to execute Graal and Perceval at scale. So once we collected the data from Git and GitHub, we use the data storage component that is Grimoire Elk. Grimoire Elk is in charge of enriching the data. So basically, in this case, we are adding information that are not directly available in the data we are collecting. So for instance, if we focus on Git, we could add here information about pair programming. If you focus on GitHub, we could add information about the number of comments. That is something that is not directly available in the GitHub API. One important part here is the way we deal with identities. So in order to understand the community, the IoT community, we started collecting the information, email information that were available in Git and GitHub. So according to the email, the domain, we started classifying and grouping people together. So then we were able to identify people from Red Hat or people from IBM, so large companies that are actively involved in IoT. And then we have, so these things was done with Sortiat and Astal. And then here we reached a point where we have just the data, and we need just to use the last component to visualize the data. That in this case we use Kibiter, that is an extension of, it's a soft fork of Kibana, that is part of the Elasticsearch ecosystem. And the output, that you are going to see it right now, is basically a dynamic web page where you can filter and drill down the data to better understand what you have. So this is basically the dashboard. So on top you can see that we have different tabs. So in this case, since we don't have too much time, we will focus just on Git, but you can access the dashboard and start checking the data. We removed the author information, so you will not see here the name of people, just the name of the organizations. So as you can see, if we start checking what we found, we can see that Linux, Apache, and Eclipse are basically there. They share the IoT ecosystem. Then here you can see the categories Alvaro mentioned. So we can see that, for instance, OS virtualization is much more important than fog or integration, that seems to be side categories of the IoT ecosystem. And then here we have the organizations. So the top one is Intel, then we have Apache, The third one is unknown because we were not able to classify the people there. So we were not able to associate their domain to a company. Generally there you can find people from university or freelancer. So in that case, it's clear that they are unknown. And then here you can see on the past 5 years, we have around 2,000 commits and, well, 5,000 people contributing to IoT. So we are talking about an important community. And here we can see the evolution of commits and authors grouped by the different organizations. And again, we see the foundation, sorry. And here you can see that maybe at the very beginning, Apache was the first one, but then Eclipse started also contributing to IoT. Okay, so yeah, if we want to change
for having the complete history for the last 10 years, this is how you can change the timeline that you are analyzing.
You can see that the data is automatically reflected here, and now we are analyzing the last 10 years, while before we were analyzing the last 5 years. So, and we have prepared some ad hoc visualizations that are this one, because the one that you see are basically the default ones in Grimoire Lab, and here this is a summary of the findings we got. So we can see, for instance, in the category application, we can see that the three foundations are there. So maybe Apache has more commits, but Eclipse has a larger community, while Linux has more organizations contributing to their project. Again, we can go, for instance, to OS virtualization, and we can see that in this case, Linux is leading this part. Then we have the other categories that are, for instance, the fog one is there is basically Eclipse there, and then we have persistence where there is just Apache. So here we have tried to summarize a bit the findings. However, in the presentation, then we have we left several slides for the people that want to read the presentation. So we have tried to put for each category something we found. Anyway, again, if you want to navigate through the dashboard, it would be great. So then you can try to answer the question you would like to get answered. Okay. So I guess I pass you.
Yeah. Okay. So in order to have enough time to complete the slides, we are going to show you just, for example, the findings we have found for one category. We have 10 categories. You can take the slides and go for all the categories in order to understand the different things that we have found from the data. But for example, in the case of OS and virtualization, we have found it interesting because there is a large community in this field. And Linux Foundation, for example, is the one that seems to have more activity here. But in order to show you the decisions that we have done building this information, for example, we have considered that the Zephyr project is a project from the Linux Foundation. That probably is not totally right, because it is not a complete Linux Foundation project, but it is related, it's a kind of collaborative project from the Linux Foundation. So the relationship between the projects and the foundations are pretty clear in some cases, but in other ones, it is not so clear. For example, in the case in this category, in the case of Apache Software Foundation, they have not a lot of activity here now, but the NUT-X project that this morning we have talked about it is joining the Apache Foundation. So, for example, in the next release of this report, we have seen that, for example, the Apache start having a lot of commits coming from these NUT-X projects because it's huge. It has a lot of different commits. So, at the end, we try to show the main projects and also the activity, the main projects, and the organization behind each of the categories. We have done this for all the categories, so please take a look to the slides if you are interested. And if you find strange things, that is possible, because we don't know the details about everything, we are more than happy to receive this feedback from you and to start improving this report. So these are, for example, all of the different categories. You can use the taskbar and just click in a category, and all the taskbar is filtered out for this category, and you can analyze the data for it. And we have here created a table. It's a kind of summary table showing the different categories, the main foundation in each category, taking a look to the number of commits, the size of the community, and so on. And then the main project in each category. For example, we have here Apache Camel, Zephyr, Paho, Cura, project that we have, for example, talked about them this morning. And at the end, the main companies that are there. So, as a conclusion, which foundation is the winner from this study that we have done? And there are good news that for us, for Valerio and me, the winner is open source, because both of them have a pretty close activity between in a global view, and taking a look to the different categories, you can find that the different foundations are working in most all of the categories, and some is leading one, the other one is leading the other one. Each foundation has different strategies. So this is pretty good, because, for example, if some strategy is wrong, you have the other two foundations that are going to try other different strategies. So at the end, we think that there are a diversity that is pretty good for IoT. So about the coverage of the dashboard, because you can think, okay, you have selected the project from the foundation, but maybe the foundation have not attracted the main IoT projects. We have, for example, cross-checked the data with a report from the Pack Radar. I don't know if you know it, but it's a consultancy that is creating reports about different industrial sectors, and they have reports about the IoT platform based on open source here in Europe. And the main companies, according to this report, are BOSS and Eurotech, that are also the main companies, two of the main companies that appear in the dashboard. So the data in the dashboard, we feel that it is not the reality, and maybe it is not 90% accurate, but it's pretty accurate, and it's a good estimation of the current status of the IoT community. So maybe we are missing the Mozilla Foundation with the Web Things IoT, but probably we will add it in future reports. So one thing that we have found that is important is the collaboration between the different projects in the different foundations. They are collaborating, for example, the projects in Apache are collaborating with the projects in Apache, or also with the project in Eclipse and Linux Foundation. And we don't have a lot of data, but, for example, in the project that I know better, the PLC4X, they are working closely with Eclipse, with Milo, Condito, and with other projects. And, for example, the Eclipse Cura, that is in the IoT Gateway, that is the leading project in this field, is heavily based in Apache Camel. So it seems that there is clear collaboration between the projects, but we need to, as always, to improve it. But in open source, it's pretty natural to collaborate between projects. So, but it's not a bad idea to try to improve this collaboration. For example, with this kind of the rooms, that is great for the IoT community. And with this dashboard, we are trying to also to offer visibility, so you can know the projects that are in the IoT, and try to close them together. Okay, and this is our last slide about the takeaways from this talk. The first one is the dashboard that is going to be public for some time. Yeah. We don't know, but Viterja has offered to have it online and to support it. So we can count with that for the IT community. And what is important is the contribution, that we expect your contribution. We have a GitHub repository in which we are opening issues in order, for example, to improve the classification, improve the project selection, improve the foundation that we are considering, improve the insights, the different interesting things about the projects. So we hope that you can help us in this repository. So please, if you are interested in improving this kind of information, join the projects, and we are more than happy to hear all your ideas. And for us, that's all. It's time for question. I don't know.
All right, are there any questions? Please raise your hands.
This is a relative positioning of open source providers for IoT solutions. Did you also look at closed source providers for IoT solutions like Microsoft, Amazon? Closed source providers.
Yeah, closed source provider.
Yeah.
We have put all the focus in open source projects and open source projects inside the foundation. So, for example, Microsoft is doing pretty interesting things in IoT, and there are projects open source also, but they are not inside the foundation. This is why they are not here. But probably this is something that we need to change and to start, because they are a player in this community, that are an important player. So we should find ways.
So probably in the next release of this platform, we'll try to aggregate, to integrate other projects that are not part of the foundation.
Yeah, but we need to find a clear criteria to do that. So we need to think about ways. Okay, why we are adding, for example, the Microsoft projects in GitHub, and not, for example, the project from any other provider. So these kind of things should be solved.
We have time for one more question. So anyone? Okay, thank you guys.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.